Ed Wilson, President Planning and Zoning.
Ryan Sending, Zone 2, Ward 2, excuse me.
Debbie Murphy, planning and zoning.
Dave Dakota.
Travis Schurz, or maybe Ward 1.
All present and Thomas Ford. Let's, do, we will do,
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
okay, we have no old business to discuss this meeting, so we're gonna go right into new business. The first one is the responsibilities of the committee, since this is our first one. With the overview of the duties, which are to hear, decide appeals where it is alleged there is error in requirement or determination made by the authorized official of the city of Baltic in the enforcement of the ordinance. To hear and decide appeals to discussions made by the officials or authorized officials of the city of Baltic regarding zoning permits. To hear and decide upon petitions for variances to vary the strict application of the height, area setback, yard parking, density requirements, as well as not be contrary to the public interest. A variance shall not be allowed to vary the use regulations. To hear and decide only such conditional use permits as the Board of Adjustments is specially authorized to pass on the terms of the ordinance to decide such questions as are involved in determining whether conditional use permits should be granted, and to conditional use permits with such conditions and safeguards as are appropriate under this ordinance are to deny conditional use permits when not in harmony with the purpose of the intent of the ordinance. Any questions on what we're supposed to accomplish? Perfect. All right, so the first thing that's been brought up is according to ordinance for Baltic, we're supposed to have a tree board.
Which people is actually you guys.
It's us, so. So with that, we also are supposed to have Parks and Recreational Department board.
And just park and rec maybe.
Committee, yes, or committee, yeah. So them are two of the other duties that we have with planning and zoning in Baltic. And then we are also required for code enforcement. Yeah, which one? The code enforcement, the one discussion, so, we need to decide if we are going to do the code enforcement in planning and zoning, or if we want to have a hired person to do code enforcement.
In the past, hasn't, well, Bill, but whoever the building inspector was, did code enforcement.
It is, but because Paul Clark is on contract on a
Right.
part-time basis, we won't necessarily, he won't have the bandwidth to handle both. And so I think it's, worth a conversation.
Sure. So that's what we gotta decide as planning and zoning, if how we wanna handle doing the code enforcement part on a full-time basis. Sure. Is there any suggestions?
Do you think you should have a board of 3 people, 1 single person? I mean, you thought any ideas as far as what the best game plan to handle that is?
I think we should have 3 people to help with that, just based on the fact that more perspective of what perception is of different people's ideas.
We have the power to enforce code as needed for the overview of planning and zoning, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, for hiring anybody, I don't know what, I mean, this is gonna be some sort of hired position, is it something that's going to, is there any cost associated with it, are you looking for volunteers,
I would,
people already active?
I'd prefer if we could get volunteers to start with, to get things going in the right direction, so we can see where we're at after we get going.
Typically, from code enforcement, as I understand it, when there is an issue with code enforcement, the city is the one that actually sends the letter.
Yes,
And so the letter comes from City Hall. And so we're not asking someone to go knock on somebody's door and tell them to move their stuff. We're
Right.
just saying we need it. But I think what Ed is trying to communicate is you guys need to decide collectively how you want to approach identifying code enforcement violations and then instruct City Hall and make recommendations to council about how you want to act on it. I think is really urgent.
yeah, and the board would be something that would, the code enforcement board would be something that would refer to us. And then we would get, and then pass it to the city for,
Subcommittee essentially, or?
yes, yes, that way there, you know, it's residents in the town that are, you know, driving around, see it, you know, type stuff, because not one person's gonna sit there and drive around the whole town to look at code enforcement, obviously, so. And it's not meant to nitpick every little thing, it's more of a broad general area.
I do believe we have the ability to submit complaints currently on the website, if I recall, the old website, I guess I didn't, I don't know if the new website does. I don't know where they go, what they
I'm
go
pretty
from
sure
there,
that
but
it's there.
that's what I thought.
Yeah, and then that goes directly to the City Hall
Right.
employees.
Okay.
And so go ahead, John.
It seems like I should be at least an ex officio member of whatever you put together, because ultimately we're looking at ordinance enforcement, so
Yes,
I'm happy to do that as part of the process, so you guys can have a sounding board.
That'd be wise.
Sure.
Given X amount of years ago, because I don't remember, was there not a some gentleman that actually did the code enforcement to keep it? I call it non-politicized.
There was. And, Bill Pearson did some of that too on that contract.
some of it on the contract, basically,
And it's a very time intensive process, and it's a difficult task. Because it deals with, you know, as you can imagine, interpersonal
Emotion.
Nobody likes to be told that their property is not in compliance with something, so it's just human nature.
Eventually, the ideal would be to have somebody that is hired to do it, but we gotta start someplace to get going, since things have changed with, obviously, Bill wasn't here no more, he resigned and stuff, and obviously the person we found out to be a building inspector is not really a code enforcement person, so until we can figure out where we're at for budget wise and everything else, we need to start with something to get code enforcement if we have to have it.
Another thing you guys could consider whether or not that would be the group to review the codes and see if they are even timely and make sense. Because I've heard from other citizens that maybe the codes that exist may need to be reviewed.
Some do.
So that could be the group that starts that process and just kind of review it and bring to attention what you guys want to do with it. Because ultimately it would be your guys' decision to present it to them.
What do other cities do? We looked into what everybody else is doing as far as code enforcement goes?
So I do know that there is a guy out of Brookings that does code enforcement. He goes to, I know he does a bunch of towns, Brookings and West. I don't know how far south he goes. Sioux Falls, I don't think there's anybody in the broad area right there because Sioux Falls does their own code enforcement. They got multiple full-time people to do it. So, but, it's not something that you can Google and find people that are listed for doing it. You gotta find the person that's through this, because a lot of the ordinances aren't just local ordinances, they're also state ordinances that local cities and stuff either make more stringent or they adapt the state standards, so. And right now ours are pretty much just the state basic standards.
Yeah, who's the guy in Brookings? Do you know his name?
I do not know his name.
Brookings has their own.
They do, yes, yes. So this guy's from the Brookings area, but he does it, I know he does Cavour, he does Iroquois up there, this, by the Smith, and he does, I think it's Volga. He's got like 12 or 14 towns that he does. So, as far as finding somebody that will do it for us on a basis like that, we could probably start by contacting Sioux Falls and seeing if they know anybody in the local area, or even Brookings isn't that far away too, if there's in between somebody that does the code enforcement.
And would you like an action item to be for the city staff to do some research about what there's?
Yeah, I think that would be a good suggestion, is to,
I like to see what small towns are doing, sorry, whoever other small towns are doing that don't have the capacity to employ a full-time code enforcement. I like the idea of having somebody qualified to do code enforcement, doing that position, because it is, you gotta know what you're doing.
it's important.
Yep.
I can
I'd
help.
really like to see what
Yeah.
everybody else is doing in that aspect.
And, also, sorry, John, go ahead.
And
Yeah,
we can step over. I'm happy to help with the staff, be part of the staff to help do the screening or come back with some recommendations.
yep. So I'd like to put an action in to have the city investigate hiring a code enforcement person,
Different routes, yeah.
different routes.
Is that something they have to go on, John?
It's probably would be advisable to do that. Sure, that way it's in the minutes and.
I'll make a motion to, have city staff look into code enforcement opportunity or, options.
Travis is first. Nathan, you're second.
All opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, next. We have a suggestion to add an ordinance to do with the trees and boulevards. The request is to not allow trees to be planted in the boulevard that is part of the right of way because it causes damage to curbs, infrastructure, whatever in time, whether it's 5 years, 10 years or whatever, but so the request is to have the ordinance that if you plant trees, they have to be on your side of the property line.
And
Oh, Ryan can explain it too. He's in on part of it.
Is there any example? Most of the time with the trees in the boulevard, we already have an ordinance that any man-made structure, concrete, they're supposed to be 5 feet from any man-made structure, sidewalks, curb and gutter. Most of the boulevards are about 10 feet if they're sidewalk. So realistically, our ordinance states that you can't put it in there, but people still do plant. This is the removal of just having it so that they can't put it in there based on all the utilities. City utilities are under city streets, Mid-American, Alliance,
So,
Midco, yeah, everything else is in the boulevards, which then eventually gets entangled into the trees and it makes a mess for any construction company coming in. And if we ever do any upgrades or repairs on our stuff, it's a huge cost. This is back when we replaced Elm Avenue. I was thinking the city spent $60,000 on just removing trees from the boulevards, so we could redo that whole area of town.
And they were bad too. I mean, some of the trees there, you didn't have 2 foot between the curb and the tree because once they grow, they get bigger and bigger. And then the other problem comes into play is when those trees have to be done and the trees have to be removed. Well, then the homeowners, they planted them, it's their tree, but it's technically not their tree because it's in the right of way, which is technically city right of way, so they can be removed, but then it's a hassle for the city too, because then the homeowners are upset, and if it gets eliminated, so it's wrote in there right there that you can't put them in there, then it eliminates all that conflict.
And then along with the trees and the boulevards, they are overhanging streets, sidewalks. There is rules and regulations of height that they're supposed to be above the streets, above the sidewalks. With that tree board, with the way we had it set up, we have to notice every property before to know that there's a violation. Then if they don't remove it, then the city at that point could hire a firm to come in and charge the homeowners. But years past, the city's always just removed them or trimmed them and not charged any property owners just because it's a service so we don't wreck our equipment or, especially along the highway, we have truck traffic. And it is detrimental to a lot of those truckers, combines, farm equipment. They rub the sides of their, $500,000 pieces of the equipment. And just because we're not keeping up to date on our tree trimming.
So there really isn't a lot of places in Baltic that have sidewalks, right? The old part of town does. You know, I know that one addition,
Well,
that GPS, they don't have any sidewalks at all.
Correct.
So
So,
how
the
about
Nielsen edition does.
the Nielsen
Yeah,
edition
yeah,
does it there?
subdivision,
How about the new
valid
edition? Are they getting
yeah,
sidewalks?
they have to.
Oh,
Really,
okay.
the only one that doesn't is the Baltic Heights edition.
Oh, okay.
But
And technically, even though there's not a sidewalk, there's still a boulevard, because the city still is 11 to 13 feet from the curb is still city right away. So even though there's not a sidewalk there, there's still technically the boulevard area.
are you looking to have an ordinance that restricts you from planting trees in the right of way as opposed to the boulevard then? Or
That
that
would
way?
probably be a better,
Right.
that would probably be a
Our right
better.
of way is the opposing property.
Yeah.
Which is a boulevard is.
Now that you say that, that would be a
That
better,
eliminates the gray area of somebody.
of where there's not a sidewalk and stuff, so.
Actually, boulevard is defined whether, or not a sidewalk exists.
And that's where I was saying that it's, even if there's not a sidewalk, it's still,
Boulevard.
Right.
well, it's still
Like I see
technically,
somebody saying, well, I don't know, I'm sidewalk, I don't have a boulevard, and all of a sudden finding gray areas.
I mean, we.
Well, when it's written up, when the ordinance is written up, it gets to that point. Boulevard / right away. Just combine the two. That way there's no confusion.
And we could do that right off the get-go too, and not have any confusion at all.
So will every tree currently in the boulevard be grandfathered in and not be required to be removed?
They aren't required to be removed, but if there's a project or they need to be removed, they get removed and they can't be replaced.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Isn't there already an ordinance that says you cannot put trees in the boulevard?
No.
They're supposed to have city permission.
City permission. You're supposed to get city permission to do it, so.
The definition of boulevard is sketchy
Right,
in our ordinance. It needs to be refined.
right. Well, I know when I built my house, I was told you cannot plant anything in the front, and then I saw other people planting trees. But they told me there was an ordinance that said you could not plant trees there, and I didn't want to anyway. But they told me that when I built my house, you
No,
can't
so-
plant trees out there, there's an ordinance.
Because what it says right now is that you have to contact the city, and have city permission, which is basically a permit from the city to be able to plant a tree in the boulevard. But people haven't followed through, they just plant trees in the boulevard, so. By making an ordinance that explicitly says that you can't have it there, if somebody does, that's where it goes to the tree board with tree enforcement and code enforcement and stuff. If drive by and somebody got a brand new tree planted on their boulevard, they get a letter from the city that it has to be removed. Is basically what it
That
amounts
makes
to.
more sense. It's much clearer that way.
that's why we got that suggestion. Requesting here to make it more explicit, so there's no question. So I wanna make a motion to add a ordinance that there's no trees on the boulevard / right of way.
So basically, you want an ordinance drawn up to have to be approved by the council and go through the ordinance procedure,
Yes,
Yes.
right?
has to, yeah.
Yeah. So it would be to send to city council for approval.
Second.
Well, I can't.
Oh, you can.
I can't do that.
Okay.
Sounds like you just made a motion, never mind.
You said before, you make.
Yeah, now I gotta figure out how to say it, right? I'll make the motion to create an ordinance for city council about the dismissal of trees in the boulevards or right of ways. That,
That's what John did.
Yep.
We're gonna dismiss them.
yeah.
It's,
Sure.
it's, yeah. Well, you're bugging me about it.
Yeah, all right.
Which I deserve. Yeah, I actually Ed said it quite well, which was just work on an ordinance to present to the city council to prohibit installation of trees in what we commonly refer to as the boulevard, but which really is the right of way. I don't think you can remove existing trees unless they're a safety.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think adding a provision that any trees that are removed cannot be replaced.
Yes, yeah, be all how you draw it up in that.
Yeah.
Ordinance and whatnot. Go through the fine print at that point. I'll second, Ryan, motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, let's move on.
Question.
So,
So I guess a comment I would have on that is another town of similar size and capacity that we can bum some verbiage off of, sort of create it from scratch and
Yeah,
put ourselves in a pigeonhole.
it's not, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah. And the definition of boulevard, and actually, Jeff and I were looking at the definition of boulevard a couple weeks ago, and it's like, wow, that's murky. We need to straighten that out. So, yeah, and you'll have time, the opportunity to comment.
all right, next is the Baltic Area Development Foundation introduction themselves to the new planning and zoning council.
You folks preferred by sit or stand, since we're in a little bit tight quarters here.
You can sit.
All right, thanks. My feet are sore, so. Yeah. Wingman. Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Ryan Solberg. I'm an economic development specialist with the Sioux Metro Growth Alliance. I've been working on economic development here in Baltic for about 9 months, I want to say. 9 months, does that sound about right? 9 months. So I wanted to come before you guys today and talk a little bit about what I've been working on with the newly created Baltic Area Development Foundation. Things that we want you guys to be aware of as projects kind of proceed. Getting some feedback and also some ways that I think your committee and the organization will be collaborating or working closely together in the future. Yep, sorry, yeah, we'll just go. So to give you an overview of Sioux Metro Growth Alliance, if you guys are familiar we are an organization formerly known as the Lincoln and Minnehaha County Economic Development Associations, which was created in the mid-1990s, actually in the Alliance office right across the street, out of a meeting of the Rural Mayors Association. Our mission is to empower our member communities to grow, and through partnership with these member communities, we can create opportunities for economic growth. So a little bit more of an overview. We're supported by a variety of private investors, including utility companies, financial institutions, community banks, as well as private developers. And we jointly serve the following public members. So 15 municipalities: Baltic, Brandon, Canton, Colton, Crooksdale, Rapids, Garrettson, Harrisburg, Hartford, Humboldt, Lennox, Salem, T, Valley Springs, Worthing, then as well as Lincoln and Minnehaha counties. So we really focus on two things in our work, which are growth and engagement. Growth is kind of the traditional side of economic development. It's what people think of when they think of economic economic development, which is, new jobs, new contributors to the tax base. We can measure that by increase in sales tax, increase in property tax, increase in number of jobs and businesses in town, as well as housing units, which is becoming more crucial to economic development with housing becoming a bigger issue nationwide. And we also like to focus on engagement, which is really a softer side and a more holistic side of economic development. This would be things such as marketing our communities to make them more attractive to potential residents or businesses, supporting municipal staff, municipal leaders on economic development theory and policy, community development, right? Creating that sense of community pride and buy-in from citizens in economic development. So those are kind of our twin pillars of what we try to focus on in our work. Want to click on the next slide. So partnership in Baltic, why I'm talking to you today, I just wanted to give you a brief roadmap of how I ended up sitting here tonight. So about a year ago, the city of Baltic and Sioux Metro partnered on what was called the Build Baltic Initiative, which was to kickstart economic development efforts. Deb, I know you participated in that, and I wasn't around quite then, but I believe it was a series of public meetings, as well as a couple of committees that kind of discussed where economic development had been in the past and where the community would like to go in the future. Out of that, Sioux Metro Growth Alliance created a list of recommendations for ways that the city could start to kickstart economic development. Included in that was the creation of a new economic development organization, or an EDO, which could assist the city with development efforts. So in South Dakota codified law allows for nonprofit organizations, which are called under South Dakota codified law industrial organizations. And these are organizations that are dedicated to promoting businesses and communities. And they offer a number of advantages over just municipal directed economic development efforts, namely that they can have discretion in dealing with businesses and dealing with private business information. They can move a little bit faster than municipalities, and they also don't have to deal with some of the same red tape that municipalities do as well. So this is kind of a standard procedure. Communities as large as Sioux Falls, all the way down to your tiniest communities, they all use industrial organizations in their work for economic development in South Dakota. So in September of 2021, the City of Baltic began a 90-day trial with us for our newly created Economic Development Management Service, which we piloted last spring, which is that we have staff members that will go out and provide 16 to 20 hours of direct economic development support to our member communities who are willing to pay an additional fee. We trialed this service here in Baltic. I was the economic developer for 90 days. And then we worked on creating the Baltic Area Development Foundation. We executed a formal contract for that starting January 1st. And then the Baltic Area Development Foundation was incorporated under South Dakota codified law in, I want to say, mid-February. So that kind of brings us to where we are today. So like I said, we're a nonprofit industrial organization under South Dakota codified law. We have 5 board members. Under South Dakota codified law, you need 5 members. We have 5 members, which also serve as our board of directors. And we're focused mostly on commercial and industrial development. One thing that we have worked on fairly recently was a little bit of residential when we worked with the city previous administration, Habitat for Humanity, for the redevelopment of 110 Moorfield, which was the dilapidated house that's now a bare lot. So some of what we've been working on since then, or what we wanted to bring to your attention. First is a commercial development on Lovely Avenue. The lot that's highlighted there from GIS at the corner of, I believe it is at 6th and Lovely. 6th and Lovely, we've been working with a national retailer. Well, really their private developer, bringing them into town. They've kind of been reevaluating expansion into Baltic due to rising interest rates and what they term to be a uncertain retail environment. So they've been reevaluating that, but we're continue to be in communication with them, and we're planning on contingencies in case that deal does not materialize. We're still searching for redevelopment opportunities across the city, looking at areas that could use a little bit of tender love and care, a little bit of investment, much like 110 Moorfield, as well as the identification of appropriate areas for light industrial development. When we kind of do an evaluation of the Baltic economy, the businesses that seem to be having the greatest growth, both in terms of their revenue and employment and tax base, are what I've termed exporters, meaning that their final product or service is not sold to the Baltic market. They're going outside of Baltic, either into wider South Dakota or across the region or across the country. So given that Baltic is a small population, it's really, and half of that population goes into Sioux Falls every day for work, it's really hard to sustain some of those retail, dining, some of those smaller businesses. So we kind of think by getting some more of these exporters or these businesses that can build up the job and tax base, you can support those businesses in turn. So we've really focused on light industrial development, and there's kind of 3 main reasons for this. First is that there is a growing demand for light industrial space in the Sioux Metro. Pretty much on a weekly basis, we'll get inquiries from folks who are looking for shop space, looking to do some sort of light manufacturing. It can create daytime population that can in turn support other businesses and promotes property and sales tax growth. And then we also believe that what have kind of been termed contractor condos or contractor shops would be a good fit for Baltic, given the town's location and also its utility capabilities. Baltic isn't necessarily blessed with having like a large water contract or having a very robust wastewater system where you could take on something heavier like a dairy processing plant. Also, given its location, it's pretty close to I-29, 115, easy access into Sioux Falls. It'd be perfect for some of these kind of businesses. Baltic is a really nice location that can be more affordable than what you might be able to find in like a Sioux Falls Harrisburg or Tea. Yep. And if you want me to slow down at any time, let me know. So we've kind of been toying around with different ideas of where light industrial development could go in town or in the Baltic area. These were sort of the three that we were kicking the tires on earlier in 2022. So the first is out at the Baltic corner right across from the bar. There's about 160, 200 acres there. That with a straight shot down 115, easy to get up to Dells, easy to go over to 129. I-29 we think could be really attractive. The owner isn't super interested. Same there with directly adjacent to I-29. We see a lot of demand for folks who want to be located right on the interstate, both for workforce reasons and also for getting their product in and out. That person also really didn't have much interest as well. We've looked at some options here in town. The old grain elevator located right next to the railroad tracks. The 2003 comprehensive plan for the city designated that area for light industrial redevelopment at some point. So we kind of looked at that as an option. There are some utility and also landscape issues and kind of some other issues that make that not as attractive of a site. So we've continued to search. Deb, if you want to go to the next slide. Is that the end?
No.
Is it frozen? Oh, no.
Oh, please.
So here's kind of what, in conversations with folks from City Hall, as well as in our board, and what we kind of feel are really good options for light industrial development. We really think that the west side of town right now presents the best opportunities for light industrial growth. It's adjacent to existing light industrial area, really the grain elevator. There are parcels that are not really attractive for any other commercial or residential development. Also, if you have it right there on that first street corridor, right, you're really close to St. Olaf Avenue and Nidaros. So you have a really good opportunity here if you can get some good daytime population and businesses right there that could also help spur downtown redevelopment. Right, if I'm working on First Avenue in a small, say I do woodworking, right, I can walk up and go to Someday Cafe every day for lunch, or I can easily go over to Classic Corner and grab something to eat or drink. So it's a really convenient place. Plus, you're really close to Lovely Avenue, which can get you onto 115 or I-29 in a matter of just a few minutes. Also, the utilities are in place for many parcels. They might not have curb and gutter, but sewer, electricity, natural gas, they're all at the street. And we've also been working with Xcel Energy, the possibility of getting a grant to fund the study for light industrial options here in Baltic. What we've really kind of taken a look at is, if you look at the top parcel, I think it's about 18 acres that the city owns that was intended for a future lagoon pond. I believe it was in 2019 or in 2020, the city did a study of future wastewater options. Some of those options did not include putting in a third cell, right? So this land would essentially be surplus requirements that could be used for probably light industrial development because you're right next to the lagoon pond. And I don't know if anybody wants to go to a ball game or live right next to wastewater. So be a good option for light and industry. So we've been working on that as well and potentially getting some dollars to see if that would be a good fit, if access is possible, if utility extension is possible, and what maybe some of those costs might be. I think that might be my last slide. So yeah, how we can partner, how BADF and SMGA, how we'd like to be able to partner with you guys is first open communication on projects and prospects that we're working with. To make sure that they're fitting in with what P&Z has as its vision for the city and what the city should look like and what direction it should be growing in. Making sure that, these prospects, they're aware of setback requirements, aesthetic requirements, sound control, all of those, so they know upfront, what some of those issues might be. One thing that's really crucial for us is identification of future growth areas. If you look at the 2003 comprehensive plan, it's almost 20 years old, and a lot of those growth areas that were identified back then have been used up. So where is Baltic going to be growing next? Where would that next housing development be? Where would the next commercial development be? That's not something that BADF should really be picking and choosing. That's something that P&Z should be choosing. as the representative body of the people in Baltic. So if you can start to identify those growth areas, it helps us better put some of those prospects in appropriate places in town, make sure that growth is occurring in an orderly manner. Collaboration on more capital intensive projects. This would probably be for things that would require redevelopment in town. Communication with you guys as well as the city council on incentives or what other public funds might be available. And another thing, when you guys are speaking about code enforcement is economic development. If your community is spiffed up, and much more attractive from a curb appeal, you're going to attract more residents and more businesses, better for the tax base. And it also creates opportunities like 110 Moorfield where we can get a more productive or better looking property on some of these parcels. So if you guys have any questions, I think I have my business cards out in the car. But feel free, give me a call, shoot me an email anytime you guys have a question. I look forward to looking with you, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Ryan is at our disposal for 16 to 20 hours a week. He's your resource. There's projects you want to do. What's that?
You guys.
Oh, sorry. Ryan is our resource, in the city. He's considered staff, consultant. So he's at your disposal for 16 to 20 hours a week to look into things, investigate things, get answers to questions and things like that. So that's why we thought it made a lot of sense for him to come here and introduce himself to you, because everything that they do starts with you guys.
Yeah, and I probably end up looking at the zoning or the comprehensive plan once or twice a week. Just if someone asks me a question about, setback requirement on some type of building, right, I have to go dig through it because I can never seem to remember it. But yeah, what you guys do affects what I do and vice versa, so.
Ryan, what would you suggest in terms of moving forward with updating the comprehensive plan?
I think we did have a conversation with CCOG about getting that updated and what that process would be like. I would love to see an updated comprehensive plan. It's almost 20 years old. It's probably time for a refresh. I also believe you need to have a comprehensive plan adopted in order to have zoning ordinances as a city. Is that still required in your?
That can be done every certain amount of years.
We've been Linda, right? She said that she was in contact with CCOG and they're actually trying to get it set up so that they can meet with us.
Yes, so I think the previous P and Z commission updated the planning and zoning map, so that should all be accurate, or at least fairly accurate from when it was updated. But I think having those growth areas identified would be really helpful for our work.
Like not reinventing the wheel, there's a very defined process of how to create a comprehensive plan. And so CCOG is basically helps you walk you through that. It incorporates talking to different citizens and getting different feedback and focus groups and trying to figure out what makes sense. And then you guys help craft that document. You have a ton of support the process. It's not anything you have to reinvent the wheel on at all.
And I can provide a lot of support to that process. I'd probably be attending just about every meeting and hearing what folks have to say. Because it really affects, say, we want to do BADF one day decides we want to do a new commercial development. We want to do a retail corridor. We want you to walk around. It's like a villa in Spain. We need to kind of know where that should go in town. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we can reference a comprehensive plan that says this is where retail should be. This is where industrial should be. This is where residential should be. And it all just kind of flows from there.
All right. Any questions? So you already touched the Sixth and Lovely commercial lot discussion.
Yeah, so we wanted to provide some feedback. So we've been working with this national retailer for, it's been probably since March, I want to say. And so they're still kind of going through their due diligence process. We want to make contingencies in the event that deal does not materialize. Just providing any feedback on what you think would fit on that lot would be a good fit for the community. And also, I believe it's zone B1, which is like neighborhood business, which is a fairly broad term. But what sorts of businesses or what probably makes sense for that zoning and for that lot? We've had some discussions, a professional building, something where you could have like a chiropractor, coffee shop, something like that. We think that would probably be a good alternative fit. And we've started thinking about some of those contingencies, but getting feedback from you all on maybe what you'd like to see us working on in the event that this deal, knock on wood, wherever it is, doesn't materialize.
The reason why you brought that up is because I think it's important that planning and zoning collaborates with, the BADF on this. Because the original intent of the Iron Horse situation doesn't come through, that, that lot was quitclaim deeded to the organization to do that development. There were discussions in the process of that, is that the taxpayers would be reimbursed for the cost of that lot. But because this, opportunity came in such a quick time, they quitclaim deeded it and gave them all of the income from that lot as seeded money, which would have been $130,000, something like that. And so, what I recommended to them when we were in our last meeting all together is that they have a conversation with you about if that deal does not move forward, how do we look at that? Because it's the taxpayers' money that bought that land. And so the taxpayers I would suggest, have a say in what happens next to it.
That's very agreeable. So. Do they have a time frame?
So, when they first approached, they were moving very, very quickly. They had a purchase agreement, everything pretty much lined up, and I think that they wanted to close within like 30 days when they first made contact. It's kind of been slowed down, so they're working for another client who's the national retailer. They've been the ones kind of pumping the brakes on this. They're hoping to get it resolved within the next few weeks. They said that a few weeks ago, so it could be 2 weeks, could be 4 weeks. At this point, it might be 4 months, and they might come back. It's a little bit hard to tell, just because we have contact with our contact, and we don't really get to know what's going on with their client as well. So there's a little bit of a layer of separation.
Which is common when it comes to developers, because the land sale would have been with the developer, and then the developer had a tenant. So that's totally normal in that course of transaction.
So we need to consider alternative, what the community wants to propose to you to look at other options. I mean,
Do you guys have ideas for what we could pursue in contingencies? We've started to have those discussions, but more input is always welcome.
and if somebody contingency wants to do something, does this other developer have any,
They have no like right of first refusal. No.
nothing? So,
No.
okay. Is there any other questions on that? So this is just informational stuff. It's nothing to look at per se tonight, just informational.
I think it'd be wise for everybody to have conversations with people as you're out and about to get the feel for what the community really wants, what they're after, what they think would be good up there. But not that we haven't done that already. I mean, they got a pretty good idea of what
Yeah.
people do want and what people are after, but just keep those conversations going, and because it's, I said it before, we said a lot when this thing first kind of started. I think once the first cow goes through the gate per se, I think it might be kind of a gateway to a lot of other businesses possibly coming in too, so. I don't think we really wanna just jump at the first one that comes through. We wanna make smart decisions on what goes up there, so. Keep good conversations going, and
Totally agree on that, so.
I do have one question. So is it common policy for a city to give, land away like that with not getting anything back from it? I mean, is that a common practice that we would just give land?
I think the ultimate goal is to increase the tax base to
Offset.
counter and offset that cost. I think the goal by purchasing that, which was before I was here anyways, is that exactly that? It was mode of economic development, to try to use that as a bargaining tool to get some sort of economic development coming. I don't think it really ever happened, so I think this was the next step that would be the best way to try to spur economic development with a physical economic development committee that's focused on it, to be the first piece to try to gain some more tax base and try to get that offset cost. So
But with that being said, there are communities that do it quite regularly where they got city land, but they necessarily don't quick deed it to something like that, but they waive taxes for 5 years or 10 years or something,
That's
so.
usually what I've heard.
So in a roundabout way, it's kind of the same.
Some sort of lots. It's different communities. I would say what's probably more typical is that the city would provide some sort of an allocation to the economic development organization, right? It's part of the normal budgeting process. The development organization from there would probably go out, select a parcel that they would like to purchase, market that, sell it, and then hopefully keep rolling that on so they can essentially do the same thing. If you look at the Sioux Falls Development Foundation, that's essentially their business model. They get land ready for businesses, they sell the land, and they just kind of keep rolling on. This was sort of a different opportunity that presented itself. It was kind of discussions with the council members for a while of what they were interested in doing to support the BADF. This opportunity came along, and I think that's just kind of how it played out.
So there's two ways to do it. You can do a pass-through model where the city owns the asset, and then they pass it through, and the development foundation continues to pass through the city assets to be able to sell it or help the existing landowners develop their land. Or there's the situation that happened here.
So does the person that comes in, the developer, business, or whatever you wanna call it at this point, do they purchase that land then from? So they purchase it, so then that purchase price, so basically they're not getting no dollar.
They're not, I mean, so the tax abatement is standard, pretty much any new commercial building with valued at over $30,000 gets that standard 5-year tax abatement. That's pretty much standard across the board across South Dakota. But they're not receiving anything beyond what any other business that comes into town would receive by purchasing, whether it's through the city or through the BADF. They're not receiving anything different.
So then the city is not only losing the tax money for 5 years, we have also lost the income from selling that property, right?
What I would say is it's an investment in the community long-term, given that you're going to see both more employment, more residents that will be paying sales tax, more property tax value past that 5 years, as well as, in this case, it would really be the sales tax numbers. Because property taxes are pretty much capped by the state. There's not much you can do with that, but sales tax is something that can really be a boon to the community, and you start collecting that sales tax right away.
So so then you guys are gonna sell the property. And is there a guarantee that you are going to be purchasing more land in Baltic to have more commercial? Or could you go buy a piece in Garrettson with the money that you made here?
We need to,
Is there a guarantee? of
through the
any kind?
industrial organization, you have to be based within what's defined as a locality. I don't think state law defines a locality, but there is a base of operations. I've never heard of a development organization taking their money and going buying something in another community. We exist to serve the Baltic community. And the idea would be is that you take this to roll it back into the community. I don't think any of the board members would dream of saying, we're gonna go buy something down in Renton. Right, we kind of
Because
define,
that's- and the board's all kind of for Baltic.
everyone lives in Baltic. Yep, everyone lives in Baltic. You have to have at least 75% of your members need to reside or do business within Baltic.
Could you just name the board members? John?
Yeah, so it's Zach Nevin, Christian Swenson, Alex Langner, Hannah Ramstad, and Derek Simonson. So all Baltic residents. We kind of define the BADF's territory as the Baltic School District, right? So our projects are to help the tax base within the city of Baltic preferably, and then the Baltic School District kind of being the outer boundaries of where we see doing any sort of work.
Okay, but if you purchase land, if you're saying that you can purchase land for Baltic School District, that is outside of our tax. So you could purchase something, like say
Preferably,
out at the corner, which would be Baltic, but the city would get nothing out of that.
No,
Preferably we would.
They're nothing.
preferably
Right,
we
you'd get
would.
nothing, yeah.
Preferably we would. And also,
Well,
when we talk about light industrial options, if we're looking at something like the Baltic corner, the first discussion is how do you get this annexed? Because you want the city to receive that tax base, right? That's always part of the discussion. And when we first started looking at that site, the first thing was, well, how do you get an annexation quarter mile out? So that's always part of the discussion.
So any place you guys decide to, so you sell the land, you get the $130,000 to sit in the bank. You guys go out, find a piece of land, wanna purchase it, it's still gotta go through city council then? Before you can purchase something, or can you guys just purchase?
It's a nonprofit, it's its own entity.
They can do whatever they want.
They can do whatever they want.
And we'll be out with the tax money too.
But in terms of if the worry is accountability, the mayor as well as another member of the city council are ex officio members on the board, right? This is an organization that was created at the behest of the city. I'm an employee of the city. Right. The idea of the organization is to serve the Baltic community. And that's really gonna be focusing on particularly city limits, but the service area, we kind of see it as expanding into the school. Because the school is really a big central feature of this community. It's a big driver of people who come and live here and then try to enjoy the quality of life.
That's gotta be kind of out of the norm though for a city to just sign over land to, no,
No, it's not particularly.
they do quite a bit, but getting nothing out of it.
Well,
We're hoping. to get something.
You gotta get anything out of the immediate sale. It's like you said, it's a long-term picture. It's something now.
so what they're looking at is 20 years.
You're starting to snowball.
Yeah, 20 years, they're saying that you're gonna get all that money back, whether it's with sales tax or property tax revenue in there, or people moving to town because they work there, so you're gaining that tax base, and that's what they project, and that's part of what CCOG does when they sit down and do that analysis thing, they go through all that type of stuff too on.
Question. This is more for John. Most committees that, receive money from City Hall have to submit their budget. So we have that, for the auditors. Because the Baltic Area Development Foundation is a separate LLC that they have to submit their budget for, not for approval, but at least for knowledge, or is that outside of that jurisdiction?
And I wish that was a simple yes or no. If I had to guess, I would say no, they don't have to submit any financial information. There are non-enormous and other fiduciary and other duties that I suppose could perhaps come into play, but.
The 501c3, your annual filing is public.
Right, you're exactly, you can go to, go on the website, and I subscribe, I get confused with ProPublica.
Yeah.
There's a website where you can download the Form 990s of every
I
nonprofit.
guess the reason why I'm saying that is in the interest of transparency, and Debbie's concerned about where the taxpayer dollars are going. It might be something in good faith that would be idea to consider to let them know what they're spending the taxpayers' money on with your budget.
That's already in the plan. So I work in another community. We work in a lot of different communities. This is a new organization. We want to try to head off the conflict between a independent organization and the city. So we've been working on the budget process. We want to have that presented to the city and have people see what's going on.
I mean, that's the class thing to do. And also, in order to establish a longer term relationship of mutuality, I mean, nobody wants to alienate the other, I don't think. Otherwise, it'd be like a bad marriage.
All right, are we done with this for this evening? Any other questions? Good, okay, let's move on. Baltic Heights, concern with, I don't know if the gentleman that lives at 47 North Sixth Street here, which Zach what?
Similar.
Similar. What was? Does somebody say the name? I got this brief thing about something with the backyard.
Yeah, just the erosion issue in that area and how low, it would be I can't quite see, but Chloe Street. So it would be, the east side of Chloe Street
Yeah.
and the west side of North Sixth there.
Yeah, your backyard and the houses that are being built on the first 3 lots there.
Yes, correct. And then also the 2 lots above it, it all runs downhill.
Yeah, that's normal.
Yep, and the same with, the opposite side of the street and the rest of Sixth Street runs down into David Avenue. I've just noticed throughout this summer, because there was no erosion netting put in place, and the poor grading that they have back there, has caused, a lot of my factors that I put down to wash out into the street and down the drains. And then also like my neighbor's yards, well, to the point where like I have a 6 or an 8 inch trench running through my backyard, snaking through.
On your side of the property line?
Yes, in my.
From the neighbors up the street?
Yeah,
Which are already full
it
house.
essentially starts at where both of our downspouts come,
Okay,
in between our houses there on
yeah,
Sixth Street.
so all sold houses, okay.
Correct.
So with that being said, it has nothing to do with the development,
Even
So-
though I'm still within,
it doesn't make
My-
a difference. As soon as you purchase the property, you're responsible for your erosion control.
Okay.
So anything that is washouts on your property, people could complain that your dirt's going onto their property, but yours having the washouts, that's your responsibility.
Okay.
So that's part of when you purchase your house, if it didn't have grass on it, it was black dirt it, that's all that's required. It's yours to plant grass, do your erosion control, whatever.
right, did they put any sort of deposit down with the city when they built that development to have the infrastructure, the storm drainage?
They have to clean it out when
They
they
will,
progress.
okay.
That's one of the
Noticing
requirements.
The poor quality of, damming that they put at the street drains. And then also the silt fences that they put up aren't maintained at all.
Yep,
So a lot of that top dirt or even fill dirt.
all
It's
developments
washed down.
in the subdivision code, all developments are required to clean out the storm sewers when they're done.
Yeah.
And just so you know that there was, Bill was out there checking elevations. There was some elevation issues when the houses were being built that I've heard of. So I don't know if it's worth looking into that or not, but I just want to let you know that there was concerns when the houses were being built.
So based on that, when the plot is done legally, the surveyor that put all the corners post in, they're supposed to be set to an elevation, which is based on the plot plans. So the only way, if one of the people in the middle built their property up, then it would be their responsibility to cut that back down if there's an issue damming it, because those property pins, you're not supposed to, underneath the plotting, you can't adjust the elevation of those. They're all set for the drainage coming through the backyards. So if there's damming being done, then it's gotta be looked at. Now, the houses that aren't finished yet, obviously, theirs ain't right yet because they don't have their dirt finished and rated and ready for grass or sod. But yeah, the washout, like between your houses where your downspouts are and stuff, yeah, that's all. I mean, that's a pretty standard, any place you're at, feel that once you purchase it, it's yours depending on what your contract was with Nelson. So if you have yours with Nelson that he put sod in, then it's gotta be right for sod, and he puts the sod in and you paid for it, that was part of your deal,
Yeah, I
so.
understand that.
But yeah, no, that, any of that stuff is, once you purchase it, it's the owner of the property's
Okay.
responsibility to, as long as the property pins ain't disturbed with the set elevations.
And where can I find the information on what that set elevation is? Who was the surveyor that did that?
It's on the plot, which I don't, we're trying to get that one onto the city website with the plans for the development and stuff. So then that plot has the elevations on it,
Okay.
and they're all based off of sea level, so I don't know if they're 1,500 and something here, or
Right.
what they are exactly, so.
Zach, you should be able to get that from Wilson too, as a landowner, someone that purchased from them, just ask them for the original plat.
It might be in your plans.
It might be on your title,
Well,
again, your title insurance.
Yeah.
Policy. I can
Yes.
Should be, yeah, should be.
I know when I-
another sort of like gray area comes in. So the blueprint that I had signed off on with Nielsen before the house was even, before the foundation was even dug, is different from the house that I have. In the fact that the elevation of the ground is supposed to be around the back of my house with two, where both of the bedroom windows would be on the bottom floor, having, drawing a blank here, but, egress windows.
Yep,
They don't. The elevation of the ground is below both windows.
so from experience with digging hundreds of basements for houses, when you pick your lot with your house or your plan, that plan might not work on that lot. They're supposed to tell you, but that has nothing to do with the city, because the building permits for the size of the building, nothing to do with the elevations of your garage or where your egress windows are, if you got window wells or not window wells. that's all between you and Nielsen. If you were under the impression you weren't gonna have them, that's a private matter.
We have a walkout and they didn't dig deep either. If you drive down where I live, you'll see that my house sticks up a lot higher than my neighbors. And everybody else has got a flat driveway, mine's steep. Because they didn't dig down that far. And their concern at that time was water flow in my backyard, because that's the main drainage area. Not an issue really, because everything's away, but
And mine was a walkout lot, and I put a garden middle because I did handicap, and I'm on Valley View, just down from him, so. And that was a choice that I made to change that. Because I wanted a handicap garage, so I had to sink the house down extra 2 foot, so. Which eliminated a walkout. So that's, like I said, that's all based on the lots, but the plans are generic.
Right.
Because they don't take out and shoot everything until they're there to dig the basements. And that's good.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Next. St. Olaf future development discussion, I believe that's to deal with, Tony. That's, has to do with you, questions about putting a building where the old gas station was.
The east of the old gas station is what I mean,
East of the old.
So the discussion had brought up with Ryan was actually then to the east of the old gas station on St. Olaf. And basically I'd be targeting contractor condos. So I would
oh, okay.
pull up.
So between the old school and the gas station.
Oh.
Old gas
Okay.
station.
So the old bus barn, and because we moved the business, we could take out that loading dock, and put in, be approximately a 40 by 70. Sorry, it's a 40 by 78. And then we'd probably go 18 or 20 foot sidewalks, which would be approximately this, which would, the old gas station is 16 foot sidewalks.
So right now, that's not zoned,
It is zone B1,
it's zone B1.
which is, trade. Is an acceptable service for B1.
Except for when you read it, is they're doing any service to vehicles. So like the old service station that was there had a conditional use to have a mechanic shop there.
Right,
So,
that is correct. So it'd be the old bus barn and the loading dock.
So which one's that, 6 and 7?
it'd be five and
Five and
five and
5 and 6.
5 and 6.
Just 5.
Just five.
just five and then part
And then
of
a
the,
portion of the loading dock.
so you would have to replat part of that other lot into,
It would be its own plat. I would just replat it with the county so that it was its own entity.
so. I would say no, myself, to having them down there because it's not zoned light industrial, and if somebody goes into a shop condo and they start working on vehicles, you would have to have an official use permit to be in there.
Can I ask a question? I'm having trouble visualizing. So 9 is Sunday Cafe?
Yes.
So 9 is Sunday Cafe, then it's the little patio.
The library.
Then
And then
it's
you got the
gonna be the
library.
Sunday bar.
The library,
Then the
Then the
white,
library.
between 8 and 7 is gonna be the library.
yep,
And then building 7, what's that?
that's the,
That's
yeah,
old gas
One
station.
is 6,
Okay. And then
then 5 is the bus barn.
5 is the bus barn, and you're looking to do just 5.
Well, it'd be 5.
Five and the rest of the dock.
he would take the 501 address and part out part of it.
How many units?
I would be targeting 3.
How do you feel that would impact your neighbors on Main Street? Both short term and long term.
Considering that you're trying to bring in businesses during the day, I would say that we would end up just as we have to follow the noise ordinance, so that all is in effect. I think it would be a benefit, you're gonna bring in 2 to 4 employees per condo.
Your businesses already targeted, so.
I have a waiting list for 25 by 50s that are.
How far off St. Louis Street would you plan on trying to put the building that's?
Yep, so I would actually line it up right with the old gas station and the bus barn, so that's actually 25 feet, the sidewalk.
So you got one problem on the 501 lot where you wanna take out the loading dock there?
I would actually use that as a frost free, that is actually 13 feet of concrete, and it would be 3-foot base already
Yeah.
with 2 dead men. That wall's not going anywhere.
No, so, but to plot that piece of property into its own entity, from the property line, you gotta have 100 foot of depth.
And we have it.
There's 100 foot before you get into being, keep in mind to plot that piece out, you gotta also have your distance from the other streets to the other address.
Scroll down just a
Oh, sorry.
tip. Because that goes all the way to the alley.
Yep,
Yeah, so we own all the way to the alley.
yep, so, but now you would take it all the way to the alley and plot that separate.
Most likely, if I did do it that way, then I would do an easement for 501.
So
So
then
that
how,
would maintain parking.
so then how deep would your lot be from,
I would go half depth.
you'd have to get something drawn up for how you're gonna plot that, because you gotta meet all your requirements for the depths of the lot. And then if you plot out part of that lot, you still have to keep all the requirements for the lot, the building that's already there to keep all the requirements
Correct, and that's actually almost 35 feet.
from
So
that
my living
piece,
room window,
which is by the truck park there. Or,
right next to the blue numbers.
okay, up there, yep,
Yep, straight out. It's actually 45 feet to that corner
of the building.
of the loading dock. So if you go from my west wall all the way to the other side of the old gas station, that's
Yep.
460 feet.
Okay, so, because what I was saying is from the street, that would be Third Street. From the lot line there, you'd have to have a 100 foot deep lot minimum.
For a quarter of a city block.
From
I know I have,
to-
I don't even have to
Just-
pull it up because the property itself is over 40 feet. And we have 40 feet in front.
So the building's 40 feet? From front
Bus
to
barn
back,
is 40 foot deep.
and your
north
40 foot,
wing is 46 wide.
So something to consider, just, I mean, that, there's obviously the mechanics of the requirements a lot, but because we don't have a kind of comprehensive plan in place, something that you should probably be thinking about is what we want our Main Street to look like, both short-term and long-term. And that's not to tell Tony, no, that what I'm saying is just envision, we all know that our Main Street is lacking at best, right? And so we're all trying to think about how to reinvigorate, Tony's bringing to the table that he thinks this is one way to invigorate it. So I think one thing would be worth a discussion point is if not that, then what? You have the landowner right here. He's looking to develop it. He's looking to do something with Main Street. If the idea of having it now, it's pretty raw space. It's not real fun to look at. We all know that, which is why you're looking for stuff, right? But, if the idea of having 10-foot garage doors on our Main Street, if not that, then what and how can we help Tony transform that? Because we have a real opportunity right now with someone looking for a change in that landscape. What can we do to help elevate our Main Street? I guess is what I would like to hear your thoughts on. If you're even willing to entertain that. I mean, I don't even.
I'm all ears, but I just got, everybody's, when it's somebody else's checkbook, it's always really.
Exactly.
no, yeah, so, I mean, nothing's cheap to build right now, anyway you look at it, so.
What size building were you gonna build again?
I was looking at 40 by 76 or 70.
And how tall?
I do 18-foot sidewalls. primarily
So
because.
you'd have 16-foot doors, so you'd have big
they'd
equipment
be
going in,
12 by 14.
14.
Would you ever consider mixed use and put apartments on top, so it kind of softens the look and
I'll
feel
put a apartment in,
of the apartment over the whole thing?
no. I'm not gonna put in a 40 by 76-foot apartment.
I'm just asking, because,
I would put in a apartment to make it mixed use.
but it would be on ground level or be on second floor?
It would be a mix. I would do a lot like Lloyd, where you have your garage space, street level with your dwelling above.
I guess what I'm looking at is the look and feel of Main Street.
So, okay, so you'd have two big doors that would be condos possibly, and then one that would be like a double garage with a apartment above it,
I was gonna go single garage, but
something in that sort.
you know,
I think the first thing is, first thing you'd have to do is get actual measurements. To, with the lots where the property pins are, actual measurements. With the building on there, basically, I mean, it doesn't have to be engineered or anything else, but, because even to change the plotting, you still gotta come through us to do that. It's not just through the county to change your plotting, it's gotta come through the city because it's city.
it is all one ownership.
Well, it don't make a difference if it's one ownership or not, it's individual lots, you got a separate deed for each property. So it's not the county that decides if you can replot it, it's the city of Baltic that decides if you can replot it. And then to do that, you gotta have all your measurements of the lots, where the pins are now, where the building's gonna sit possibly, so that everything could be obviously approved, so.
Would you ever consider professional services on the main level and apartments on the second level? Is that something you consider if the numbers work?
I got a 600 square foot ready to rent. Show me a professional that wants to rent. Going where the business is,
Where's your 600 kept on?
middle school. So with us vacating and moving to the lumberyard, we do have an empty, 600 square foot. We still have our diagnostic lab up there, but, we would have it would be a common lunchroom, shared conference room, shared bathrooms, and a 6-person cube farm. Set up ready.
So you can help market
Yeah,
that.
can you do this week?
So I think we just need to, have you get information to us so that we can have a meeting and look at it and see where we're at with a more set thing than putting a 40 by 76 building on more than one lot that doesn't fit at current time.
And I guess my middle ground would be, I would have no problems doing like a 4-foot river rock bottom with steel above. Right? To me, that's a good middle ground. That's, some people call it wainscoting. But the idea that it would have to be quartzite or a concrete building is just not economically feasible.
No, but you can also put up a metal building and have a stucco on the front or something and steel on the sides, or wood siding, lap siding on the front, I mean, they do that all the time.
It's not currently on Main Street, so
No.
that's why I'm not asking for it.
I guess my concern would be a 14-foot tall door. You can get some big equipment in there,
There's already 3
and
up there.
with the library right there, the kids and stuff like that, how much traffic of big equipment would we have going down Main Street? I guess
The
that would
B1
be.
doesn't allow for industrial use. Right now.
They can't. put
We're
that
pretty
there.
much limited to, a couple of delivery trucks. We still always had less than the grocery store. Semi deliveries is, and I don't know the exact verbiage, but I would call it discouraged. Right, so it's more pickup and trailer. It wouldn't be your large commercial, even though, your main street here was concreted and was built up for that purpose.
Well, I think more the library with the kids,
Yeah.
there with.
St. Olaf isn't concrete with asphalt on it, it's only asphalt.
That one would be,
Well, I dug right down the center of it, to be honest with you, but new water main in it 20 years ago, and it's not concrete, so.
so the other big issue I do want to bring up though on this one is sewer. So for the city diagram, there's actually supposed to be a sewer up the alley and there's not.
Which city diagram?
The
sewer.
one that used to hang on the wall up there. So.
Says there's sewer up the alley?
Right, there's not. So, I did have a brief discussion with Ryan. And I have our attorney looking into the right of way, but we would, propose bringing up an 8 or a 10-inch private sewer line up the alley that we would be able to replumb the old gas station and additions to that. But it would be a private. Meaning the city would have to maintain it. But then we're gonna foot the bill.
Where would maybe look at your plan, John?
Well, you can, I mean, they say there's sewer there, but I know that the sewer for your existing building comes with the gym, comes down the hill to the other street. And the existing buildings go out to St. Olaf to the sewer.
Negative.
Where is there, I mean,
Everything goes west.
yeah, just, but it goes to St. Olaf because there's a main that runs right down St. Olaf, the old grocery store, which is the deal.
There is no sewer on Main Street. Because there's a water main, but there's no sewer.
No sewer on Main.
Someday goes west.
Oh, yeah,
gas
because these
station
go out the
goes
back.
west.
Yeah, these go out the back. Yep,
Again, there was supposed to have been one put in and it wasn't.
You know when it was supposed to.
I just know it was a Huron firm and I got the pencil drawings at the shop.
If you put in that private sewer line, would you put it back gravel or would you put pavement on top of the gravel?
It's just crushed asphalt now. So if we, whatever we disturb in the street, we would put.
You just replace?
I talked to Mike and tried to figure out a little better drainage so that when we have our monsoons, it doesn't flood his garage. Sewer is actually our biggest culprit up there.
And what action items do you want to take on this?
well. First, I think you need to get us a drawing of the sizes of the lots, where the building lays down, what you wanna replot out for. How you wanna put the plot in there to separate that piece of property. And then, as far as the sewer goes. That there would have to have basically an easement from the city to put a private sewer main down the alley.
So I guess I'm gonna, if it goes down the alley, yes, but if I go onto our existing property,
If you go onto the existing property and you'd be, well, you got that corner building there that you can't go under, but you'd have to be out into the alley at some point in time to get to the
I was
street.
gonna talk to Mike and actually, like I said, go across his. Cause there's the city of Garrettson, if I'm understood correctly from Alliance, the city of Garrettson is actually fed with that fiber optic that goes there. No offense, I don't wanna hit it.
No. No, you don't wanna hit that. And he's right too, that feeds more than just Garrison, so. But
So we were looking at, I was actually looking to go still in the right of way of the alley, but technically I believe that would be about 4 feet on private property. But that's exactly how far I've made it with my due diligence.
That's a lot.
Stewart has way more priority to me than a building. I don't like the sewage in the basement.
okay, so let's have you get us something. And then we'll get it to the city hall so that we can get a planning and zoning meeting set up and then we'll look at it.
Yeah, so we were figuring a manhole, basically right where you see the bus barn is where we would put in like a manhole to service them like the old gas station in addition, and then we would actually change our sewer line from the old school dumping into that also. And then we'll let the school go forward deal with the clay tiles that are using, so,
Okay. That'll work. All right. Coop Edition, 4th Street, 600 block. That's the fun map, so, Grant Park bought the old trailer court, or out the trailers. And sold the property to Mark Tomarosson to put multi-family housing in there. So when in 2005, when Bud Stanky owned the property, he had the old 4th Street, which ran through it ran right through the center of that piece of property, basically where the number 4 is. Okay, so in 2005, he vacated that. And the alleys in the street, which would have been Moorfield, that would have ran through and tied into 4th Street right away. So when he vacated that, he gave the city 12 feet of property, which made his property line go from where the 4th Street is, go down there to where the lot line is now. The only mistake there was back then that it's still 11 feet short of a right of way. So they vacated a full right of way and an alley and a partial street to get 12 feet of property to make it so that the lot lines are literally on the edge of the asphalt. The problem there now is when somebody wants to build on that property and replot it into lots, they have to put curb gutter, sidewalk approaches in there, which are technically all on the property, within the property then. So we need to look at how to address this to be able to gain the 11-foot, which still makes the lots deep enough to put the buildings on with all the requirements for backyards. How we want to address obtaining the 11 feet that's needed to make it a 66-foot right of way instead of a 43-foot plus 12 foot, so 55-foot right of way.
How does that play into the water project that you haven't seen the details on yet, Ed?
Well, so right now on 4th Street, the water main runs down the west side of the road. It's a 6-inch pipe, C900. It was put in 20 years ago. So when they come down and they want to run over to Grant Park addition through the alley between, where the 4th Street is right now, that little strip through there is where that is proposed to go, I believe. They have to upsize it. So in terms of that, when they design that to keep everybody in service, they should look at putting the water main on the other side of the street, which would put it literally right under the edge of the asphalt, which is right on the property line. Almost. So.
Just so y'all know, that strip that's highlighted in blue, that's already owned by the city of Baltic, because they've always held on to it in a just in case kind of a situation. And so that's already owned by the city. That's why they're putting the water in there.
You mean the turquoise?
Yeah. the
Yeah,
turquoise, yeah.
that piece of property right.
Okay, it's the old dump ground.
The old dump grounds?
Yeah.
So nothing can really be built on there.
No.
It's all like, they tested his own. We'll see a lot, don't say they board.
Well, it's so narrow.
Okay.
It's all right.
So is what we gotta do is we gotta come up with recommendation to pass on to city council on how to go about this missing distance here because, he's trying to get it plotted for 4 lots to put 2 fourplexes and 2 fiveplexes in there to bring in more out. Well, we have options, which the most favorable option is the city purchases the 11-foot, but then the problem comes into play that Mark is buying it on a contract with deed to start with. So technically Grant Park still owns it until the deed's paid off. So, it's something that would have to be worked out with Grant Park about that section of property, which since they didn't replot it or do anything with it after they purchased it, nothing was noticed until the plotting came out, and they came out and located the property pins.
Has the school district been approached about selling the strip of land
For,
to make up the, move to it?
The east side.
Oh.
On the downside.
John, what you can't see is that's on a steep hill.
that's a steep hill, it's unusable property,
But it would allow the lot size to be
the same,
the same, so who cares?
true.
Well, I can guarantee you that if he talks to swapping land with the schools, it's kind of a tender subject for us.
Well, it's time to offer an olive branch. No,
So right now, the lots are 146 foot deep. If that's the right number, right? Yeah, 146 feet deep from where the lot line is on the edge of the asphalt to where the school property is. So if 11 foot in the front would be
135.
attained, they still got 135 feet, which is enough room to put the properties, the residents in there and everything.
And get 50 feet off the back. Flat line to the closest corner right now, so 10 feet is still 40, still, you're allowed 25.
And then if you look on there where that property ends and the next property starts, the lot lines, that comes out to be almost 11 feet where the jog is, where the blue comes into the pinkish highlighted stuff. That's about 11 feet difference there, which would make that come straight across to the north. The other option would be to request an 11-foot easement of the property for the sidewalk to be placed on, because the sidewalk's supposed to be on the city side of the property. As well as the water services would have to be extended past that easement and would be the city's responsibility up to the curb stop, which would be 11 feet into the property. And then Mid-America Energy has when they did this work, Mid-America Energy was granted a 10-foot easement, which we would have to obviously talk to them about, because once it wouldn't be private no more, their easement wouldn't be necessary no more because they can be in the right of way. But with them having a 10-foot easement there, that affects putting a water main too close to their easement because it's private property with the future project that's proposed.
Doesn't get any easier.
Did I miss anything?
No, I think you did good. I think the big thing to think about is.
Sorry, this is Justin, he's with ISG.
ISG engineering firm. As like instances like this come up, it's a great chance to get get it back to standardization, right? So it's a little off right now. There's not enough right away, but now is the great opportunity to get that right away if everything works out, right? Get that sidewalk, everything on the city property, you know, talk about future water main projects. It's too early to tell where that water main will be, but to at least have those options later on, you know, especially with Mid-American. I mean, they like to be in the right of way anyways to begin with. It's a lot less easement, and deals on their end as well.
And they will eliminate an easement if it becomes right away, so then that takes that issue out of the problem.
Okay, so you're talking like, it's just the jog there is the problem. He has to have enough space there to get all of the buildings in that he wants, is that
Property
it?
pins are typically 11 to 15 feet back off your curb. You maintain it, but the city owns it.
Mhm.
Which is
My
the
pins
boulevard.
are right out in the street. So something happened back in Bud had it, that it never got rectified or moved when they transferred,
Mhm.
vacated the street. So now to make it right, to put curb and gutter in, and when I do the whole 514 feet with driveways and sidewalk, to make it right, the property pin should be back where it's supposed to be, but now we're on the street. So, and I'm working on getting it replotted, and I noticed it when I had a mistake. Said, well, this ain't right, my pins are off the street, so what do we?
Well, it's not, because by code, because of where the lot lines are, I mean, he's only gotta be 25 feet back. Well, if he builds 25 feet back now, then it could cause, like Justin said, now's the time to take care of the issue
Huge headache. Huge headache.
and not deal with the headache after the fact.
By the
And
way,
the only reason why we have this stuff is we complex safety, and he had the original files, all the original paperwork, and handed us a stack of papers this big, and he goes, I don't need this anymore, and handed
Handled it.
And then
And that's-
just went through it.
That's why we found what took place in 2005, that, you know,
Wasn't caught.
it wasn't caught, they didn't think about that for some reason, you know, he gave them. So originally, the lot line was almost in the center of the street when he did this, and his deal was, well, I gave you 12 feet, well, okay, but by vacating that street, you just got 40 feet of property instead of the 12 feet, so it should have been looked at then, and I don't know if the trailer houses were already on the lot when that happened in 2005. I wasn't around here then.
yeah,
I think it was an accommodation to drive.
So, I think they did it that way instead of doing it the right way and saying, we'll give you a variance to have the trailer houses closer to the property line. At the time, they did it that way, so everything was still right, but not right, if that makes any sense. So, we need to send a proposal to city council to look into talking to Grant Park about that 11 feet and how they want to handle that at the present time.
shouldn't all three parties be involved?
Well, Mark should be, yeah, Mark will be involved too, because he's the one purchasing it, working on the plots right now. Because we gotta get that, before obviously his plots can get approved, we gotta figure out what.
Yeah, now's the time to do it, so I don't see a problem with taking care of this. I mean,
So John, how does that transaction work?
Well, I don't know, the word easement keeps going through my mind, and then Ed mentioned variance. And, I don't know if there's a time limit on a variance. Does that still be an option?
So right now the trailers are gone,
Yeah.
so he wants to put permanent structures.
Right.
So, a variance just allows you, so a variance won't be able to put the city sidewalk on that property.
Right, so we'd have to look at an easement?
Yes. And the reason why is because city sidewalk is supposed to be on the right of way line on the city side. So you have to have something there designated for that purpose. So if you get an 11-foot easement, and then with giving an easement, then is where the variance would come into play is how far does he have to be from that easement with the front of his building, because technically by city standards, even though there's an easement there, he would only have to be 25 feet from the lot line, which is the street, which would only put you 10 feet
So it's not
from the sidewalk.
an easement and not variance. It's not-
Yes, so a variance is if you wanna put your building closer to the property line. So the easement is basically like Mid-America has a 10-foot easement there, so they can come in there anytime and do work on their gas line in the easement. Which is usually, like we said, in the right of way, which also gives them the right to work on it
Sure.
because that's an agreement with the city. So with that being said, with that future water main project that's going to happen eventually, it wouldn't be in the city's best interest to have an easement there because you won't not only need an easement for that, but you're also might possibly have to have an easement for water main too, then that at the same aspect, depending on how it has to lay in there to make everything work.
Well, an easements always grant benefits and burdens, so the question is, how are those benefits and burdens allocated? I mean, I need to think about this.
So we gotta, obviously, it's gotta go to city council to go
Yeah.
through you and stuff, so
Yeah.
it's something that's gotta get sent to city council to get addressed.
Who's doing the engineering and surveying?
Midwest.
Midwest. Okay.
You've got your preliminary plots.
Yeah, I can send them, he sent me the preliminary plots, I can forward them to you too, so that you got
That'd
them.
be fine. So this is a discussion item for tonight.
This was a discussion item that obviously has gotta get forwarded to
Yeah.
city council, so, I mean, I don't think we have to have motions to send it to city council, it's just, to make everybody aware of the zoning or plotting issue, so.
Because the council doesn't have to do anything and except for be aware of the pros and cons until the landowners come back with what it is that they think is just and fair.
The contract deed, which I've got, which was finally filed with the county, is, you know, I just gotta have Brian's approval on whatever's, it's legally, the land is mine, it's just, as with any accusation, there's no bank involved, it's.
Yeah,
He's the bank,
So-
pretty much, so. He's the lien holder,
Yeah.
which
If
makes
any changes, we just, you got okay, which I've been told, when I
Yeah.
bought it, anything that needs to be happened will.
Well, and there should be times that address boundary line issues, and I would think in the contract for deed. Does the contract for deed allocate who's supposed to bring this out?
Let me go look at it.
Sure.
I don't know, it's a piece of paper that I don't understand.
I'll be walking pretty stooped over when I leave here. Maybe we just shoot a copy.
Huh?
Maybe we just shoot a copy. Would that be okay? Sure.
Yeah.
So I think we're done with that pretty much for now, until it gets figured out for the plotting approval. Next we have Lagnus Edition, Viking and Second Street. Is it Corey Wyman? Connor, sorry. Connor Ford. Okay, they both heard the scene, I did good there, okay? So, I got a couple pictures and a little bit of lowdown on it. What's your concern on where you're coming from?
But my concern, if you want to go with the house down there, please.
Yeah.
There's a, to make it easier for people to see, go up to the right-hand corner.
Yep.
You see it looks like 3 sheets of paper stacked on each other, click that. Go down to government boundary and unclick it.
Oh, so you can see the actual.
Oh, hey, now you see the houses.
Now it's not all over.
You.
Are you
I
with the
haven't gone
county?
through my phone.
I run trouble.
Oh, okay. Okay. You don't have anything else though, right?
That's where we want to be?
Yeah, that's close enough. My
Okay.
concern here is the water runoff from Viking Avenue to culvert here. It'd be on the east side of
Here, you can see
of,
it.
yep, right there, and it goes across to the east, straight east. Yep, so that culvert there, my concern is the water runoff from the upper property down there, running along my property and putting dirt, rock, gravel, all that onto my property. Same kind of with these other things, silk fence, options like that. Just wondering if there's something along the line of a culvert being buried there to drain off into the farmer's field.
Well,
You're just passing blame on the farmer.
Well, it runs off into his field. So what I'm getting to is my fence on the backyard there on the west side,
yep,
the water damages that.
okay, so.
Have you replaced that fence?
No. No, not on the west side.
Well, I was there
Give us
from
the board and
1979
property ordinance.
until June of 21,
Yep,
and I had no issue.
maybe the rain runs differently, I don't know.
Well, that land is not even. That is probably the worst.
So
It is.
I stopped and looked. And the way the water runs is the natural low drainage valley. Swale, whatever you wanna call it, that runs all the way out the backside. And if you go down to the far back corner, oops, sorry, and look up it, you can see right where it runs. So as far as the silt fence stuff, there's no requirement for silt fence because the grass is established. It's been there for 50 years. It's been doing the same exact thing for 50 years before you bought the property.
Yep,
So as far as now, the city can't put the water to somebody else's property. The city don't own no property there at all, except the right of way. So
to
there's,
my knowledge, the triangular piece right there,
the city don't own it.
who owns the fence?
Okay.
Okay,
It's all private property. The city mows it because I don't know why exactly. So
That's something else. That's something else we're looking at.
that's something else that's gotta be looked at. So that's mowed by the city, but the city does not own that property right now.
okay.
So,
That's Joel Frank.
Just.
Okay.
oh yeah, and then Justin also looked at it from
Okay.
ISG. So,
And Ed kind of hit it on the head. The challenge on there is trying to change that existing drainage path. Right, so if you start pushing that to the south, you're doing a lot of grading and extents, and you're gonna have to continue to carry that into the farming field, and you're changing the natural water path. As you see a lot, when you start changing that natural water path, it's gonna go right back to where it wants to be. You see that all over, people change them, and then creeks and streams always go back. So you could spend, upwards of $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 on trying to push that to the south. And over time, you'll likely see that migrate back to where it wants to go. That natural drainage path is always going to persist.
Hey Connor, can you show us where your fence, is your fence on your property line then?
Yes, my fence is, there's no, so
Can you
see
just
the
go there and?
south,
Thank you.
The red blue line.
I've got fence from here, the property line, diagonals here, comes the property line, existing fence runs along here, wood fence along the neighbor's property to the corner of the house. The fence that's being damaged is this stuff right here.
Where's the damaging at?
On the base of it, it's washed out, the whole bottom of it.
Is that?
Right along the fence.
Is that newly constructed fence?
No, it's been there for, since it was put in. I haven't touched it.
so the only way that you could solve that is, I know in other towns and stuff, in certain areas, they require the fences to be off the ground when they're in those swales so that they don't obstruct the flow. That would take care of the damage, obviously, because then the water's gonna run underneath of it until too big of an event, but, because people put fences in that are touching the ground, well, then the swale's 5 feet off the property lines because of the way the developments were done. Well, then the people upstream, every one of them, that water backs up because they blocked the natural flow of water, which you can't do. It's against It's in the South Dakota law, so.
Okay.
Where is it pushing snow in that area?
Just over the curb.
So they wouldn't push it right over to kind of.
They turn their plow and they come around the corners that I've seen anyways. So the city right away still goes to the blue lines. To the blue line with the pink highlighted down there.
And on the south side, there's no curb there.
Yeah. Cause technically that's still considered. Oh, well, it's rural, yeah, that's where it's from. And the city mows, and the city mows that edge because it's technically like a township road where the township or else the owner can mow it, but the farmer don't mow it, so the city mows it to keep the edge of the city street better.
So does the city of Baltic have a subordinate ordinance for protecting the properties downstream, like the county used to?
Not yet. You mean for residents and stuff, just what the state has? Or the county, depending on which one, I didn't get that far in the book to see which one we got in our book for that part, so if it's the state or the county.
No, I guess if I could make a request, I was wondering if that culvert could be cleaned at all from the debris that's in it.
That's something we could send to city council.
Is that like something?
That's something
People
that,
ask, just the mud and stuff, just get washed out.
that would be something we could send to city council to get it on the maintenance. To send it to maintenance, so we can do that.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay,
You might as well figure every culvert in town.
yeah, well, that's it, it's not everything to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all we can do here is send it to,
It's my understanding the culverts
it's half there.
ideally should be on a schedule of getting cleaned out on a regular basis, whether or not that's something before, I don't know. But it certainly would be a goal of ours, once we're all staff.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to Phillips Crossing Grant Park addition.
This is where you bring everybody up to speed, and that wasn't at the council.
Yeah, so there's been numerous issues with erosion control issues, sediment, failure to do the required SWIFT requirements for, developing property, as far as stabilization, preventing runoff, damage to properties and everything else. So they plotted the lots under conditions, that are in the letter that I don't know if I got it with me. I don't think I had you bring that up. I got it on the email, but, so those lots were plotted in both editions on conditions that it was an ongoing project. So they knew there was gonna be work being done yet, bike paths weren't in and stuff, but the conditions were that they were required to take care of their erosion problems. So, with that being said, they have not taken care of all the erosion problems with the property yet. And then underneath the, enforcement of the zoning and planning and zoning committee says that all ordinances in the subdivision ordinances must be met and approval by city council to plot lands and have them valid. So since the erosion problems have not been met, which was already a condition, there's other subdivision ordinances that they have not met, like they got 6 lots in Phillips Edition that don't have the proper backyard requirements. They're not 100-foot deep lots. They got two that are questionable depending on which way they face the house. Two more questionable on which part of the cul-de-sac circle you measure from on how they put the house if they got 100 foot. And then there's two lots in Grant Park Edition that do not meet the requirements for the backyard requirement. The 100-foot distance to allow it to be a valid lot.
Just from a higher level perspective, because you're giving really good specific examples, but just for the purposes of the committee, because I know Nathan, you were at that meeting. When a subdivision comes in, there's subdivision ordinances that were passed in 2000 that specifically outlined what should happen when a subdivision is approved. And so when Grant Park and Phillips Crossing came in, they asked to have it approved, and Travis confirmed that that they were moving in good faith. Now, when that happened, they were between city attorneys. So when they were asked to annex and to move forward with the platting, they were between city attorneys. So it was approved on the condition that the incoming attorney would approve the verbiage, correct?
Correct.
And so also in good faith, the developer would honor the subdivision requirements, which is what Ed is listing out in detail. And so what happened is they went ahead and moved forward. The new attorney came in, he approved the agreement, and so then they started going. On January, it was noticed by Bill that there were requirements of the subdivision that were still not being met. So he sent a letter to the developer, whether or not it was approved by the engineer or not, or was discussed with the city engineer or not, we don't have record of. And Bill sent a letter to the developer saying, hey, we did this in good faith. There's still some things that aren't done yet, and we would like you to move forward with those things. To date, this still has not been met, and which should have been met before they ever started building. Did I state that on a higher level for you, Ed?
Yes, because without having a valid plot, which requires both things to be met, technically they can't have a house on it. And there's already people living in houses there now, which are not valid lots because they're not a valid plot because they haven't met the requirements that are required to be both met, other than just the city council approval.
Case in point, the short lots, though, there aren't people living on them, but there is at least one, if not two lots that have been sold.
That do not meet the requirements.
Yes, we call them a short lot.
Yes, so, and the biggest reason why that came to notice was somebody was gonna get a variance to put a covered deck on the back of their house, and I got the plan. And I'm sitting there looking at it saying, how can a house that's got a garage on the end with the houses in a straight line, not have enough room to put a 12-foot covered porch in their backyard when you're supposed to have a 100-foot deep lot and the house is 25 feet from the front? Well, started looking at it and the lot's only 88 feet deep. Well, there's 12 feet missing, which doesn't make it a lot that can be.
And there's concerns because you're talking about the lot that is behind the property.
Yes, because you live in the, yes,
The county
Okay.
property.
yep, so,
Yeah.
yes. I talked to your wife, I
Yeah.
believe, so, yeah, so,
And our concern is that a good share of our, there's quite our property is 2.5 acres, roughly, I'd say 1.5 acres to 1.75 acres drains right to those backyards.
yes, it does.
No, and we talked about it. I'm on high ground and I listed first.
You're okay.
Yeah, but, I mean, so I don't want people putting in garden or, sinking, window wells and it's and I have the elevation maps that were originally approved.
For your
For
lot
Phillips Crossing,
or for Phillips Crossing?
and there has to be one hell of a swale behind those 3 lots. Because there's a significant amount of water that comes out of Valley View
through that corner down there.
Well, there's
Yeah.
a river there the other day.
Yes,
So there's some, so my concern was always that those lots seem, and I said that back then.
Yes, you did.
so, and I didn't know that back then, so, and, after I talked to your wife,
In fact, I was the reason the whole thing got derailed initially, because I realized that planning and zoning, I actually read the ordinance and realized the planning and zoning had been set up improperly for years.
so,
That's
So
also true.
yes.
I like to read a lot, and I've read every ordinance in the city, and I've read state law on annexation
Yep.
front to back, and so we had, my wife and I had concern about those lots because we knew what
Yep.
they filled in. And so that's why we talked to you about the,
So, and you understood with the variance that, you know, it's, I mean,
Yeah.
so.
and I've applied for variances on other properties I own.
Yeah,
So I understand, so, but that's kind of why it always kind of didn't sit right to me.
so once it got brought to the attention that I got the plot plan then after the fact and started looking at it, obviously,
In conjunction with Justin too.
yes, and Justin looked at it too, and he's the one that actually sent back a, email with the lots, with the actual 88 feet, 89 feet lots instead of the 100 foot deep lots. The lot we're talking about right now is 307 up there. The middle one on the first, on the north cul-de-sac
So
there,
these side cul-de-sac ones, the 307, the 302. the
407, 402, okay, and then the 500 and 509, they're questionable because if the lot gets to the cul-de-sac, they don't meet requirements. They're too shallow.
All these backyards right here
Drain,
drain to right here,
yep,
okay, and then it goes this way, and then they have, so their low points right there. That's where it goes into this creek. Now, between each cul-de-sac, these lots are walkouts.
yep,
It drains right here towards 7th. It drains right here towards 7th. So all of this goes to there, this one goes to there, this one goes to there, you know, and so on. This is still a major problem because all of this drains to there and all of this drains to there. Plus your property, right, Doug?
yep.
So then it goes to there and then it's gotta work its way to the east.
So I understand you're bringing it up, and I understand it's a problem. You guys, what are you going to do about it? Or do you not know what to talk about?
Well, as of right now, with that and other issues, the first thing that my recommendation to happen is we have to stop building permits being issued for any lots until they get the issues taken care of. And if they don't start taking care of the issues, it's gonna have to get moved to a city, making everybody stop working in the development period. Because it's problems that obviously haven't been addressed. The state's been there, they've re-inspected it. They haven't met all them requirements yet.
Can I just ask how long?
How long
For
for,
the record, how long it's been?
since the state's been there?
Or that they've been told that these requirements have to be met? They have to-
Last summer.
Well, when it was annexed, they knew that there were specific subdivision requirements, I believe, like Wendland was mayor when those were passed, and they followed them all.
No, it was, no, but Jim signed the subdivision right here.
Yeah.
When the regulations were passed, I think he was mayor in 2010.
Or he would have been. Sure. It was
Because that was 2010. He was mayor and Jim Wendland was the.
subdivision regulations go back to 01, I believe.
Is it 01?
They were,
Am I thinking of the other?
they've been in place a long time.
Yeah, so anyways, Jim Wendland's signature is on the subdivision ordinances. So,
And they were followed when Valley View happened. When Valley View went into effect, all of those subdivisions were.
This is really an engineering problem.
It is.
Bottom line is,
it's an engineering issue that was approved
yeah,
by planning and zoning at the time.
and Banner was there and it was anywhere at 22, I believe.
21,
January.
21.
Was it?
That approved.
No, it was 22.
This is 22 now.
I know it is. of January of 22 is, there's P and Z minutes from, I think, October of 2021, and I believe there's P and Z minutes from January.
Yes, yes.
2022.
Yep,
And that's when, I think in October of 21 is when Banner made the presentation. And you can't tell from the minutes what was being reviewed. It doesn't tell you. And so I don't know where those materials are, where the files are, but I don't think anybody in this room knows where they are. So we really can't tell who did what and approved what. And
Yeah.
So the timeline is really much later,
yeah,
because I left in February of 2021 and Freeburg came on in April of 21. And all this stuff happened in the fall of 2021,
So-
January of 22. So
well,
the timeline you outlined, Deborah, isn't right.
no, they started the development in 21.
Oh, I understand that.
Mhm.
But, but if you look at the minutes in October of 21 and January of 22, and I thought I brought those with me tonight, but I didn't. They're on the website.
Yeah, I read them all,
Yeah, well, I understand.
so,
I'm just trying to point
No.
out that, this is an engineering problem, it's a drainage problem. The subdivision regulations are not rocket science, they're
no,
simple.
they're right there.
Anybody with an eighth grade education could do it on the checklist
Yep,
and see whether they were met or not. And so I think it's time this city do what you're suggesting, Ed. It's time to just cut to the chase and
Get it
stop building permits. And because we got all these people, and frankly, I feel bad about it because they're suffering property damage and emotional distress and the city's going to get sued soon unless we do something. It's going to happen. And then we'll have a lawsuit to defend after everything else.
Okay, if we recommend to city council to stop building permits, could we
we
also,
don't have to recommend that to city council, we understand, we can do that
Okay.
because we're the,
okay,
You can-
well, we also need to look at lot number 500
yep,
on, Fifth Street and Catherine.
Where?
That one right there,
yep,
500 and 502.
yep.
There's a
504.
huge, well, I don't know about 504, there's 500, 502, 504, 506.
Yep,
But that area is a huge area for water flow to go through to flood this town.
it is.
We need to serious up about stopping any kind of permit on that land and see what we can do about purchasing it, putting in the detention ponds, something,
So first thing is we don't have to look at purchasing it.
okay?
There's been information found that when the development was designed, Banner recommended a retention or detention pond in that location. They words were that they're gonna use the school's property in Murphy's Pond as the detention area. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So it was not put in. Now, Justin has the numbers.
So in the stormwater drainage report, you can look at the numbers of the runoff actually leaving the site, and it is a significant amount, and I mean,
Yeah.
you guys are correct. 99.9% of subdivision ordinances that you gotta maintain and detain the stormwater on site. Every city has a little different variations on that to what kind of conditions, but most of the time it's to existing conditions to not increase the flow, right? So with using the school property and Murphy's Pond, it gets very, very touchy if there's no agreement in place, right? There's, some instances where the city will have regional detention and then there'll be agreements in place with the developers and cost sharing. To my knowledge, none of that has happened. And there's no practices downstream to really detain that water, right? So it's just pushing through the system and like you say, just costing more maintenance for the city for their own. Looking at Murphy's Pond, you can see the sedimentation already in it.
And that's
to
one of
my
the things
knowledge,
that
it was just,
the state also said that they are required to clean that pond out again.
So Justin is here as a civil engineer.
Yep.
With ISG, which is an independent voice, so that the city can get direction. I guess that's really the takeaway from this meeting tonight. Is that these are matters of engineering and drainage and flood and erosion and sediment control that are beyond the expertise of everybody, I think, in this room, no matter how much common sense you have, except for the engineer. And the city has not had an independent, accountable to the city voice to give direction to P and Z and to the city council so that we can move forward and move past this. And so that's, I guess that's really the takeaway, Deborah. I don't know if people, it was Justin introduced.
I just
Yeah.
wrote.
You real quick.
Justin Hymathize.
Yeah, so, but that's why Justin's here is to provide that independent expertise so that everybody's interests can be protected from the city's perspective. And I would think this would also be welcomed by the developer because it's obvious that whatever was in place wasn't, for one reason or another, adequate.
So in the last council meeting that the council approved to have Justin look into the situation and then make a proposal to the council. And then the council would decide whether or not ISG would represent the city. So this has been due diligence on his part to get up to speed and understand what's going on and making cursory recommendations. But ultimately, the council is the one that has to approve any cost plans that you would suggest as far as solutions. So just so we all understand how this all happened.
Isn't this a civil suit between the future property buyer and the developer? It just has to be the guidelines of the subdivision.
Cities get sued all the time over development issues like this.
The city has to
Mine
take,
got thrown out with the county because I'm subordinate.
Well, I can't speak to that issue, Tony, but I
Because
can,
that's why literally the county commissioners got rid of the subordinate ordinances because they were getting sued all the time.
so with the city accepting the plans for the project, it causes a gray area there because the city takes it over. So the city eventually takes over the streets, takes over the drainage, takes over it all.
As long as it's
accepted.
meeting the.
Once it's accepted.
subdivision
Yeah,
requirement.
but it's the city's responsibility to enforce them requirements.
the subdivision ordinances are the city's ordinances. And the city had to have the duty to uphold the ordinance.
Agree.
And that's a non-delegable duty. And so, I guess everybody in this town could start suing each other. Maybe that would be. Well, seriously, if we say, well, it's a civil matter, then let them all slug it out. We could do that. That could
But
be
at
the,
at what point does the city's liability end and begin? Where I'm really struggling.
let's go to the Supreme Court.
On this, it doesn't.
We'll find out from the Supreme Court.
It doesn't end on this because it's got annexed into the city.
Okay.
The city approved it. The engineers designed it. The city took their word for it and accepted it.
Assuming to meet certain criteria.
Yeah,
After they met.
after they met the criteria. So it's the city's responsibility because they are the ones with the ordinances to enforce. So the city is required to enforce what they approved, right, Justin?
Correct.
So the liability for the city never leaves with a development.
Trying to simplify. Have they or have they not met the sub?
No,
No,
That's all.
No.
That's.
we already,
They're relevant.
yeah, we already got to that part.
Yeah, I'm just trying to really simplify.
undisputed fact, indisputable.
They have not met the requirements. So,
That's, I'm just trying to really clarify.
yep,
It's too bad one of the representatives isn't here to talk to us, to tell us about all the issues that they're handling and how they're doing it. Once you think they've been,
It's Ag Week, their biggest event of the year. They have like over 10,000 people in town. And their big event is tomorrow and they have an event tonight. It was absolutely unavoidable that they couldn't be here. And I spoke with them.
I think they have more than one representative that works for that developer.
It is
do they
a
not?
huge.
I see them
event.
all driving around all the time.
I'm just saying it's a huge event and they're all tied up with it. They did say that they're sorry they couldn't.
I think it would be nice to invite him here, because I should have a lot of questions for all the damage they've done to my property. And I sent them registered letters and they don't even answer it.
Have you done that since the DANR came to town?
Pardon?
Have you sent those registered letters since the DANR?
I sure have.
Jane, why don't you share your information with Ed offline and then maybe he can point you in the right direction.
Thank you.
You bet.
so that takes care of that part with Grant Park and Phillips Crossing that we need to stop issuing building permits.
You may want to gain consensus from your committee.
Yeah, so I'm asking if anybody will make a motion to, and we have that authority here to make a motion to halt building permits until the issues are resolved.
I'll make a motion that we halt building permits until the resolution issues are resolved.
I'm sorry, Deb, but you're only halting building permits for this addition.
Yes,
This addition, yes.
for Phillips Crossing and Grant Park.
It's important to clarify.
Will these people want to build it?
Stop building. I got a fence, you know?
I'm not building anything. I'm just.
No, good call.
Okay, well, what I'm wondering too is what about the buildings that are under construction now? What
So-
happens with those?
Right now, we're not stopping them, but if they don't comply, we have that right to halt all work in the developments.
It is not desirable.
It's not the desirable outcome. Hopefully this takes care of it, but that is an option that is available.
Are any of the houses being built at this time that are in the real issue zones?
There's one lot sold, I know of for sure, that is on that 307 that does not meet the requirements for the backyard, and that lot is sold
That's right
already.
here, Debbie, just so you know.
Okay, but it's not being built at.
It's not being
So
built
they
on
haven't come for a
yet,
permit.
but I don't know if they got, I don't know if Ryan's still here or not. I don't know if they, I don't know,
No.
if they have not gotten a building
Okay.
permit for it yet.
So that will be halted then with this
Yes.
resolution.
Yes,
So Debbie, what it does is it allows the continuance of existing business and people that are with construction deadlines and homeowners that have contingencies on sales of their house and they can move it to the next house. We're not, I don't think the goal of anybody here is to stop, create more pain than has already been experienced. And so I think, go ahead, start.
Okay, as long as it depends on who the pain is too. If it's previous, you know, if property lines aren't being met and things like that, then it is problems for the other person,
yes.
you know.
So can we add a date to that as of the 27th of July? No building permits after this date.
I mean, you can,
I mean, or is
Well,
it?
it don't make a difference because once we do it, it takes that
It's
time
effective.
point.
Okay.
So Debbie, would you restate that?
I
so we have
make a
it?
resolution that we do not,
Yeah.
I make a motion that we do not allow any building permits up in Grant Park and Phillips Crossing addition
So,
until they meet the requirements, the ordinances
Yep.
that are provided.
Subdivision.
Subdivision ordinances.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Clarify, P and Z has the power to do that.
yes,
John, can you confirm that?
we talked about it extended.
I mean, you, absolutely, I mean. Unless and until the judge says you don't. I mean, I don't know what option you have, other than there being economic pressure there. In the end, that's the only lever. It's all you have.
Yeah, I'm just making that by,
Yeah.
if we do approve this, that they're not gonna come back and say, well, the hell you can't.
They sure might. I mean, I agree with that.
They might, but according to the ordinances on the enforcement, that technically they're not even valid lots. So anybody that continues to build on the lots are technically not even building on a lot that was valid to be a lot to even sell.
So we're trying to move forward in good faith.
To the point being to where in the ordinances, it also says that the developer can be fined $200 per lot that is for sale. That that's not valid. So because both of those items aren't met, technically none of the lots are valid and he can be fined $200 per every lot that's for sale. And everybody that is building there is still building at risk that they're not on a valid lot.
There's a variety of tools in the toolbox at discretion of the city government to try to move through these kind of difficult situations.
And we don't want to get it to that
We
point,
don't.
but it's also got to get progressed.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion passed.
So can I ask you a quick question?
Yes,
So when this was annexed in, I was at that meeting and it was based on a lie.
However, during that annexation, that detention pond was supposed to have a manhole in the center of that detention pond, and that was to drain into a storm sewer that went all the way out to Silver Creek. Nowhere in any meeting have I seen what is currently existing was approved by this council.
We would have to see the plans that have those.
So
So I've been to every meeting and I've never seen it approved by the city council.
as far as I've seen, I've never seen a plan that showed what you're describing. So some point between that initial meeting that was in the
The minutes
preliminary
are very
plans.
hazy from back at that point.
What's that?
The minutes are very hazy from back then.
So, but there's no, so Banner sent over some preliminary plans and stuff. And they may have said that, but in the plans, they never had a plan that had a manhole in the center of the pond.
But there was in there the night of that, so I saw it.
So, but they may have talked about it, but it wasn't in any of the plans that was ever turned to the city. So,
Yeah, we got copies of them.
and, Justin can respond to this, but I've personally never seen a detention pond that has the outlet in the center of the pond.
Yeah, it's like one end.
It's always at usually one end.
Typically at the end, it varies. I think to that comment, it could have been a preliminary plan. design on that. Yeah, it could have been a preliminary plan on that detention basin design that may have changed throughout the process. A lot of times during that annexation, process, will have a preliminary plan, and as things change, that may change. You know, for example, where Banner recommended that detention basin on the northwest side of the development, and the case in point said it's not there right now. That can be.
No, it rains directly on me.
Yeah.
And I've seen it go over the top of the berm now twice.
In his design, but so with Justin here, he can explain how the detention pond is supposed to work with going over the top and the different points of
It's
level
operating
in
the
it.
way it's intended.
Which property are you?
I got the whole place.
Just one piece
The
of-
25052.
pieces of-
And one thing I'm gonna.
Justin actually walked down there with me.
Recommend the council and everything before, you know, so on a typical subdivision like this, the developer goes in, they build all the roads, all the sidewalks, utilities. And then before it gets turned over to the city will approve those improvements, right? So in that is, you know, the trail, the detention basin and all that. As we saw with some of the erosion, there is some sediment filled up in that detention basin. And even though it's operating near design, I can't guarantee that it is operating to the current design, right? You will see that during the construction phase. It's what they're there for. It's for the sediment, try to trap there before it leaves the site. Before I would recommend council to approve this development, after we sort through all these other issues, we would want an as-built on that detention basin to ensure that it actually is current state per design, which will.
2 inches, two and a quarter inches of rain went over the top of that berm.
Yeah, and so that's where it would eliminate it, get it to those design conditions, per that original design. And that's when the city would take it over. And so that's gonna be one of those things where we're continuing to, you know, press on the developer to work with you just to make sure we don't have those issues later downstream. I briefed through, the design report, and the design report, their calculations do show that it should meet existing conditions.
I've never seen water like I have here.
Yeah, like I said, I can believe you're probably seeing some unnatural states there just due to some of that.
I had
erosion.
4 foot of water going through my property. We had 51 inches of rain back in 2019. And I never seen water off of terrace property. And that was terrace property. I haven't seen water analysis back on those terrace.
Gotcha.
So I'd like to see a water analysis when it was terrace, and how much water actually came my way. Because I would tell me I'm getting 21 acres, and I used to get 8.
Yeah, and that was one thing, you know, Ed and I talked about too, you know, we're talking about, what are the steps to move forward? And a lot of that is some of those drainage concerns, the analysis. Let's see what's actually going on here. Where was the backing? And basically, but sometimes it's just like, well, here's the answer. Well, what are the steps to get to that answer? You know, is there actually data backing that up on where we're at? I'm going to assume there is, but even just some of those issues on the north side, with the conserved drainage in between those lots, right? So what's the 100-year high water level running through there? Is that finished floor building receiving 1 foot of freeboard, or is it going to plug those buildings?
Story short on this. We still have to have the council approve him to go and evaluate all this stuff, so this is a precursor conversation. So
I'm
let's
just
get
getting the comments off, so it's recorded.
Oh, I understand. And so, we still need to take your recommendation about what Justin has to say to the council, so then the council can approve to actually enlist their services. So we
Yeah.
appreciate you coming
We're
here.
just
We
about to
appreciate
that
your-
part, so.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
So we're done with that part. Now we're going to Fifth Street, where the street was cut down without engineering.
Well,
That's
there,
in-
there were elevations, so it's not without engineering. But
Right.
I haven't seen,
Well, they had no plans submitted to city council,
we have not
planning and
identified.
zoning.
it.
Yes, haven't
Not
identified
located,
anything.
identified, or received
That's the proper
anything.
words. We have not identified or received or seen any plans that shows where it was engineered to lower Fifth Street and cause the issues that are now faced with the runoff, the ditches, the erosion on Fifth Street.
Just like subdivisions, there are ordinances that dictate how a city road can be changed. So it's very clear, it's black and white, not subjective.
So with that being said, I'm asking planning and zoning to basically submit a request to city council to hire the services of ISG to look at these issues with this street. And the erosion in the pond, because there was never anybody hired from the city that had knowledge of the proper stuff, information, the reports, to look at it on basis of the city's perspective. Is that a good way to put it? So with that being said, the only way to solve the issues in these developments, as well as Fifth Street, is to hire the services of an engineer that is a neutral person that isn't working for the developer or
Neutral parties.
neutral party. So that's where I need to get a motion to send to city council. Yeah.
Where was Fifth Street cut down at? Was it like behind businesses?
My drive is south to the entrance into the addition.
Yeah,
It's south to Ella.
yeah.
It'll take you to Ella. It's the name of the street.
And I quizzed them on that when they started. I was out there that day.
Which one is yours, 428 or 430?
I'm 426.
426, so the first house on the front.
Yeah, he's the one
Bring
that's
us
got the
faster.
back
That's how far they cut, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
426 to where? How far did they cut?
to
through?
right to the back of 431.
Right, yep.
So
Right.
that whole stretch
In the
got,
center of Ella. They went clear to the center.
Yep.
Okay.
so, which would just about be the property line of 431.
Right.
Just after 431, we will target.
Yeah,
Debbie, the rationale that was explained, because of the sight line when you're pulling out of Ella was not a safe intersection. They felt that it made sense to cut down Fifth Street to make Ella a safer intersection.
They
Did
should
I
have
say
filled
that
it in.
right?
Essentially, the idea was there, yes, it was the intent.
They
was
did
to
it
make-
ass backwards.
Right, it went the wrong way.
They went
Cut it down.
Now
I
we know
told them
higher
that.
hill.
They said, well, we were just told to do this.
Who did it?
The intent.
Metro did the work.
Yeah.
The intent was, the way I was explaining was to lower basically as Ella comes in, because Ella's at the top of the hill, if I remember correctly. Right?
Right.
Intent was because it was poor sightlines both directions, was to lower the crest of that hill, make it safer, so you could actually see cars coming both directions.
But they didn't go south very far either.
But that's where that conversation ended.
Yeah.
It's, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And I told them you're limiting the ditches, so there's no place for the water to run. And that's exactly what happened.
Exactly.
And that's where we
Well,
have the
we were told to
problem.
do this, so we're doing it.
I said that, I said that.
Yes.
Okay.
It was never, it needed to go for approval. how in the world did this ever happen? Because none of it was submitted to the city. Again, as far as you know.
There's no record of it.
Right, when I contacted her and gave her the.
And
ordinance.
Travis was on the city council at the time.
Right, yep.
And it's right in the deal that the city council has to approve any modifications to any street. And since it was already annexed into the city at the time, it is a city street.
It is not only that it had to be, submitted, it has to be warranted.
Yes.
By the person who's making the change to the road.
Yes,
For 2 years.
There's
Yes.
a very clear process.
If there are any other steps beyond thinking it's a good idea that need to be met, to make it proper.
and we're not saying that it's not something that could have been done,
Right.
but it was not done properly that we can verify.
Right. So what it says, so what is the solution for that then? Is to hire the company to,
Well, so we need to hire, as a city, we need to hire ISG to come in
A neutral engineer.
and take basically a toll pole. We know about where it was at, obviously, we don't have the exact elevations no more. And basically need to address what was done so that it can go back to the people that did it without permission or approval, I should say, not permission, approval to do the work, because it's gotta be made to the standards that are required by South Dakota law, not just Baltic ordinances, so.
What we're hoping is Justin will evaluate the situation and then make recommendations of possible outcomes. And then P and Z will evaluate that and bring it to council. That's ultimately what we're looking to.
You'll have multiple ways of fixing it, basically.
Yeah.
We want 7.
I don't know if I can guarantee 7.
I can think of 2 or 3.
I like that minimum of 2, you know, best case scenario, right, what would work, and maybe,
Everything's washing down.
you know, the few dollars.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
The solution now is put it together.
That's one
That's-
solution. and
That's number 4.
That's.
That's the only solution you have right now, but who's gonna pay for it?
So that's where, like I said, we, as planning and zoning, we have to make the recommendation to city council at the most convenient time to, because obviously we've already halted building permits for the development. So this is something that needs to be addressed and put into play as soon as possible to recommend the city to have a special session
I'm gonna
to,
defer to John on that.
to
To engage on
Might have a
this,
special session, you know, sure, could.
so that way I
I'll
can
defer to the
be
mayor.
engaged.
Well, I guess, because you're, yeah, defer to the mayor.
So I defer you to stop deferring.
So I'm asking someone to make a motion to, retain the services of ISG as a neutral party to evaluate the erosion problems within the lot, or the subdivision ordinances with Grant Park Hills Crossing, as well as the Fifth Street work that was completed.
Situation.
I'll make a motion.
You gotta say, okay.
I'm not repeating everything you said.
Yeah.
Why do you think I struggled?
I forgot half of the stuff you said already.
So let's make it a motion to concur with what Ed just described.
Okay, so that's a motion. Anybody
Seconded?
second it?
You're making the suggestion to present that to council.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motions passed to, refer that to city council to make, quick,
One more thing on Fifth Street.
Ed, I got one,
oh,
if you can.
yeah,
Just, this is small potatoes compared to what we just have done, but the weed control is atrocious.
they sent me a message that Monday, they're gonna have a bunch of people over there mowing and everything else when their ag week thing is completed. So, the only reason why he was gonna do it this week, but with ag week, they ran out of time, he said.
And we were told, like, kind of like. Here, were told things that were gonna happen, and we've let them, some of them go. So, but there was gonna be a sidewalk on the
East side.
of my fence. And it's pretty obvious that it's not going in at this point, so then why not finish the grade work there?
That's all part of the problems that have been addressed that. So. And your other question on Fifth Street?
Did you happen to have a chance to look into that? Sugar water, dust control?
He's gonna be calling me on Monday.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
I'd
my
really like
question.
to find out where we are with dust control. We're losing our visibility up there on the hill where you're lost home, but they cut down the road.
Sprinkler
It's
sign.
getting, it's in process,
Yeah.
in process. If we wanted to answer, we would have information on that.
So he's supposed to get back to me on Monday,
Okay.
to let me
I mean,
know.
I know we're getting really late in the year, before long, the snow will be flying, and it won't matter again, but it definitely matters. to get it
We're still, my boss still wants to do it in town. Townships are still doing it, so
All right,
we'll try to get there.
Good.
The last thing is the ordinance, the.
Oh.
Don't forget, I know you just did a lot.
sorry about that. I spaced that out. Okay, so with the Fifth Street issue, it's been brought to the attention that Baltic has a boulevard maintenance ordinance. So I know the Fifth Street thing, it's not finished and stuff, but, as far as even when street projects are being done in the city, not just Baltic, but trust me, multiple cities, the landowner technically is still responsible for cutting the weeds down or spraying
Talk about the
them.
right of way again.
Yes, yeah, because technically there's not a sidewalk there, but it's still, it's boulevard / right of way area, okay, so even though the construction is not finished yet, it's still in the ordinances that it is the homeowners or landowner's responsibility to maintain mowing and spraying for the weeds or
I would say the
whatever.
neighbors have been.
And I believe, as far as I know, they have been mowing.
Yes.
I know one right next door to me.
No,
that's been mowing.
and we just wanted to bring that attention because it was called into
It
this.
was a question of identifying the ordinance, so we wanted to identify the ordinance in the actual numbers I have in an email, but it's recorded. So I can't pull it.
This is a state, county, or city ordinance?
City.
Okay, thanks.
It's a city ordinance. So we just wanted to bring that to attention based on. It just doesn't count, it's all boulevards and right away it's the homeowner
It's not
responsibility.
something
So,
we made, it's legit.
so,
We have to mow it clear to the blacktop.
No,
Yeah.
clear to the gravel for me.
yeah,
Yes.
yes, yes.
And Dennis, you have to come on my lawn too.
So that's basically what the ordinance says. And
On some of them, then are you gonna redo the ditches so we can do it? Is that in the future?
that's part of the,
Okay.
Trying to right the ship as quickly as possible.
trying to
We
get,
understand the burden.
so. And trust me, I'm a homeowner that's got property adjacent to it too, so I mean, I was right there with all you guys, and Ryan has property that faces Phillips Crossing backyard, so, I mean, we're all, you.
I'm way on the west side, we don't have the problem. you guys.
Oh, you're, okay, so, yep, so let's adjourn the meeting,
You need to have a motion.
motion,
Second.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, all again, all right, we're
Thanks for
done,
coming.
thank you guys.
Yeah.